please stand and join me in welcoming the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, JoAnne Bass.
Chaplain's Corps. All right, I'm sitting right here. Okay, very good. I told Adams, I said, we're not going to do anything that y'all had planned. So if you had questions planned, just throw them away, and we're just going to have real talk with the chaplains and our religious affairs airmen. Is that okay? Okay, good. Plus, I'm the before lunch crew. I don't know how that happens, so I figure going off the cuff is probably what's best. So we'll sit down. But it's so good to see you all. Before you begin, because you can actually still moderate. I'm just going to talk a little bit.
I got you, Chief.
Before you begin, let me tell y'all how much I love this crew. And Chaplain Kitchens knows this because I'm actually on leave. Like they don't give us a lot of leave. Last year I was a bit of a hypocrite and I lost a couple weeks of leave, right? Like that's just what happens. And I was like, I'm not gonna do that this year. So I'm actually on leave. But this request came in and I was like, you don't say no to the Lord. So this is the only thing that I'm doing this week, kind of, as far as that's in a uniform. So I'm okay with taking it on this one because this is between me and God. So I am here with y'all on leave, but I couldn't pass up an opportunity again just because some of y'all know how much you all deeply mean to me and how you've impacted me. So with that, Senior Adams.
Yes. So I actually just want to get us started as if we're having a conversation, just me and you, and we have an amazing audience, and hopefully you all get to chime in at some point. We're looking forward to the questions. But I wanted to start off by saying thank you for being here. One of the things that stood out to me when first meeting you at one of our other summits were the journey that you said you had throughout the Air Force and the impact that the Chaplain Corps made. And so I always think about that. You know, at times we don't have the opportunity to see our work, but to hear about it later really made impact and probably motivated us to continue on. So as we get into this morning, I would like to first give you the opportunity for any opening remarks, and then we can go on through questions.
Absolutely. Well, first off, welcome to a day one for you all. I really love the theme that you have, RST. I love the opportunity that you guys will have of just hopefully taking a bit of a mental knee to the things that you guys do on the day-to-day within your wings, within your organizations, and actually just come together to sharpen each other's iron to get re-centered, if you will. I love the fact that you had today an opportunity to hear from our Secretary of the Air Force, the two chiefs, on where their perspective is, and I'm glad to amplify and share some of the things about where our Air Force is going, because I think it's important as the Chaplains Corps to know where the Air Force is going in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. But I'm also excited that you also got to hear from Chaplain, you and to Chief Chambers on casting the vision, because I think vision is important. It doesn't matter what occupation or profession you are in, you have to have a vision on where you're going. And so, so again, very excited that you're able to spend the next 2.5, 3 days here in the DC area, just sharpening each other, taking a bit of a mental knee and refocus and recenter on the important work that you guys are getting ready to do.
So, as we mentioned, this is a little different than what you may have seen with other panels. We're going to give the opportunity for you all to ask questions. So as you're thinking about what those questions are, I would like to throw one your way and ask, looking at where we are currently across the board, Air and Space Force, and looking at the needs of our most important weapon system, the human weapon system, what is it we can do as Chaplain Corps to help you take care of Airmen, Guardian, and families?
I think you do it every day, right? Just by the nature of being chaplains and religious affairs airmen, RSTs. I think that your ability to tap into our warfighter and be that spiritual pillar that they need is super important for all of us. And I'll share my story on my first experience with the Army chaplain, by the way. But the other piece of that is from a war-fighting perspective, and as a believer myself, I realize that war is spiritual. And so your ability to pray and to prep the battlefield for what we hope is never war, right? But your ability to pray for your leaders, your ability to pray for the airmen, your ability to pray for the situation, I think is extremely important. And so that's one of the things that I think your role certainly is. I'll tell you, chaplains, the reason why chaplains are extremely influential in my life, and for the past several years, I have made it a point to meet with the chaplain normally every month, right? I started that at Goodfellow, and I've continued on through Goodfellow, through 2nd Air Force. I don't know if the chaplains who poured into me are here, but Chaplain Boyd times 2. There's 2 Chaplain Boyds that pour into me. And then certainly Chaplain Kitchens and Chaplain Scheich prior to. But I'll never forget, I was deployed downrange as a young A1C. I think I might have been in Al Jaber, but this is years ago in the early 90s. And I remember being kind of a lost Airman First Class, right? Didn't know what I wanted to do, join the Air Force because I needed to figure out life. I wasn't mature enough yet to go to college. And so being an Army brat, I remember my dad saying, 4 years in the military, never hurt anybody. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna join the Air Force, right? I watched him get up every day at 4:30 in the morning, and I thought that is just not for me. And now every day I get up at 4:30 in the morning. But I joined the Air Force. I'm a little bit lost, and I end up I deploy pretty early on in my career, and I'm in Al Jaber. I think it was Al Jaber, and I remember hearing a sermon in a makeshift tent from an Army chaplain, and that sermon like full on changed my life. He said that Jesus means 3 things to everybody. He's like, Jesus either means everything, he means something, or he means nothing. And I was like, oh, that kind of hurt, right? Because I was like, Jesus meant something to me, at the time, but it wasn't either or. So anyway, that sermon changed my life. And I remember coming back to Pope Air Force Base, and I was like forever changed. And so again, the work that a chaplain does, or the work that a religious affairs airman does, you just never know the impact that you're going to have. But that has stayed with me for 31 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
That is amazing. So at this time, if you all have questions, if you can come forward. I have tons to ask her, but this is an opportunity for you all to participate as well.
And this is a safe space. This is my first unit, again, was Pope Air Force Base, my first place of assignment, and I learned something called grown folks business. And so what I would say to you, right, this is a safe space. If the Chaplains Corps can't talk to anybody, they can certainly talk to the Chief Master in the Air Force. And what I also share with our leaders, if you've been to any of our command team courses, is I'm not just General Brown's chief, but I'm your chief. And so let's just have real talk. Some of y'all have some really strong opinions online, so feel free to share, and we can talk about anything here.
All right, Chief, we have a question over here.
I'm not lying, right?
All right, so we have our first question over here.
Good morning, ma'am. I am Master Sergeant Jamal Lett from Air Force Installation Mission Support Center. My question for you is, airmen and guardians that experience loss are assisted by humanitarian assignments that typically expire after 1 year. Some airmen need sustained support and care in the installation after the loss of a spouse or child. Has there been any consideration to extend or prolong the time period for humanitarian assignments so that these members can remain productive parts of our Air Force family?
I'm gonna ask my team to write that down. I was never tracking that it's just a 1-year humanitarian assignment. And so let me chat with the A1 team on that. I would say even if that's policy, there's got to be provisions in our assignment processes where we're actually able to be the leaders we need to be and help run interference if we have to extend assignments. That's just called life. It's called leadership. It's called talent management. And so let me take that one back to the A1 team and find out. There's got to be exceptions to policy. I mean, I'm inclined to say that there are.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next
Can we-
question.
Let's make sure we get his name too.
Morning, Chief.
there.
Cedar Guerrero from Space Operations Command. My question is, we heard you speak last week on AFSA
Yes.
about being multi-capable airmen. As a Chaplain Corps member, we kind of do a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about, but how can we better solidify that process so that it's embedded in our training pipeline so that we can be better multi-capable airmen?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion that you probably have to have with Chief Chambers, through the career field track. What I would say is I would caution on how much you codify something in a training track, right? Because sometimes when you start to codify things and make it a thing, then you lose some of the agility, right? I agree with you. You all, by nature of the things that you do, you would classify in it, and General Brown talks about it all the time, multi-capable is more of a mindset than it is a checks and balances. As an airman who served 2 tours in special ops, like I was a multi-capable airman, and nobody even called it a thing. You just did what you needed to do to make it happen. And we didn't have it codified in our training stuff because really your ability to do other things depends on the tasks that you have to do. And so what PACAF may need you to do, or whatever installation you may need to do, may be very different than what you would do if you were stationed in Al-Udeid. And so you have to give the flexibility of what that looks like to really that commander on what they're trying to get after. And that's what I've shared with people. It is extremely tough watching our staff try to figure out how to define multi-capable airmen, how to codify it, how to make training things, because it's not that simple. What we need in the Pacific area is very different than AFRICOM, and it's very different somewhere else. Like at the end of the day, we're all gonna have to be able to roll our sleeves up regardless of our badge and be able to get the mission done. But I think I would start off, having those discussions with the career field manager on what are some foundational things we believe everybody has to do. And then how do we make sure we leave room for the commanders to be able to help shape what that looks like. Thank you. There's going to be some things, right, when I think about future warfighting and readiness, there's going to be some things that 100% of all airmen have got to get more proficient in, and a lot of that is medical stuff, and yeah, I'll just say the medical piece first and foremost.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Chaplain Amber Merle, Fairchild Air Force Base Wing Chaplain. So the Religious Affairs Airmen AFSC has a very small percentage for promotion, making rank. How do we take care of our Religious Affairs Airmen when we have super high quality, hard charging, and they just can't make staff because, those types of trends?
Sadie, correct me if I kind of go off course, because I don't get into the eaches on the career fields. What I do weigh in on is kind of where are the percentages for promotions across the Air Force, right? And depending on that, the career field managers will then adjust what those look like. Just a little bit of context, because I think that it's important. When I first joined over 30 years ago, I'll never forget when I was testing for staff sergeant, my supervisor said, I wouldn't even try because there's no way you can make rank. Like just physically impossible. You'd have to score like 110. But I would also say, he didn't know the Lord. But anyway, with God, all things are possible, right? So, and darn it, I listened to him and I didn't study and I could have made it that year, right? Like, so anyway, I would say, it was really tough to make ranking. You didn't make staff sergeant back in the 90s until you were probably in about 7 years, right? So So fast forward 30 years later, and specifically when I got in the seat, the bean counters and the A1 team came to me and said, hey Chief, right, like we do not look the way we need to look as an enlisted force. You should really look like a pyramid, if you will, you know, E1 to E9, where the 1% is. Right now, they were like we don't look like that. We instead look more like a muffin top. You know, we had too many E5s, E6s, E7s, and not enough E1 to E4. And so the balance of the enlisted force was not where it needed to be. And this is also during inflation times and just not great times economically. And so I was like, what if we do nothing, right? That was my question. What if we do nothing? Because I'm not okay with 2 years ago having the lowest promotion rates in the past 20-something years. And they're like, well, if we do nothing, we'll continue to kick the can down the road, and at some point, whoever replaces you will promote 0 people, right? Like, it'll be back to the early 90s where you promote 0. And I grew up a little bit old school. You don't pass your problems along, right? So I knew, okay, well, we've got to do something, but what are some, how can we maybe increase the promotion points from what the A1 team really wanted? And so we did those things. And so we knew for 3 years we were going to go through a rough period to what others think is rough. It's not necessarily rough. Because we still, for staff sergeant promotion rates, promoted 17%, right? It's not what it was before, which is, there was also a time in the early 2000s where we call it this great staff sergeant giveaway, where we promoted over 60% of people. And so here's some second and third order impacts, and we have to always be thoughtful on personnel stuff. When you promote people so fast, and they never had to earn it, like, you can't really appreciate what it means to be a non-commissioned officer and a first-line supervisor, and you didn't have the reps and sets. And so we are still, in my estimation, paying the price of promoting people so fast that they never had to earn it. So then when they tested for tech sergeant, they didn't want to have to earn it. When they became a senior NCO, they didn't have to earn it, right? Like, you can never buy or replace reps and sets and experience. And so I've been listening to our airmen for the past few years where they've said, we promote people way too fast. We don't value experience. You've got to fix this. So we fix it by slowing the promotion rates down. And our airmen are like, but not when I'm testing, right? So you can't have both ways. So I went on a diatribe because I think it's important to understand the context strategically and why we made the decisions that we did. But I think the decisions that we made will be helpful moving forward. So next year, you probably shouldn't see a 17% promotion rate, but it should never be 40 to 60%, right? Again, you have to value experience because especially experience as an E5, the people we select to be your frontline supervisors, to be your leaders, have to be people who have experience. If you have strong frontline supervisors, it would make your job so much easier. If you have strong frontline supervisors who actually care, it would make your job so much. So those are some of the levers that we're pulling to that end. But to the career field, okay, you'll talk about that when?
There's a whole brief on CFM updates.
Okay, very good. So anyway, so Sadie has to manage how that looks in the career field by, through those numbers. And if you were probably too fat in E5s, E6s, and E7s, that will then drive the percentage of what we do. Some of why we are also too large in E5s, E6s, and E7s, my PAs told me don't quit saying the word fat. But anyway, some of the reasons why we're too big, inflated in E5s, E6s, E7s is also because the United States Air Force does not have a retention problem. Like, I need the help of people actually knowing truth, right? If you go on social media and the media writ large, the Air Force Times will tell you, retention across the services are horrible, and that's just not true. We actually have about a 90% retention rate. That means 9 out of every 10 airmen are staying in the Air Force. Some of it was probably due to COVID and other things like that. But the bigger question is, but are we retaining the right people? And so because of the retention challenges, that is also why we have so many of those folks. Hey, I'll tell you just kind of a peek under the tent for the enlisted corps. We're about to pull some levers, starting with our chiefs, because we have to own this, where you just don't get to hang out and serve in the profession of arms until you're higher tenure, right? Like, you have to earn a spot at the table every day, because if you're not doing your job, then somebody else is doing it for you. And so we're gonna roll out a continuation board starting with the E9s. That means if you're not serving well, then chances are, you may get a handshake and you'll retire and live your best life. And we should never make people feel bad for that, but you've got to earn a seat at the table, and we'll probably implement that. All right, thanks, Ben.
Great questions. We have another one over here.
Good deal. Good morning, Chief Bass. My name is Master Sergeant McCartney. Thank you so much for offering this venue to speak to you in this forum. I think it truly allows for some real talk and some real questions. More importantly, thank you for taking time out of your leave to be here with us. That truly speaks volumes, and it tells us how important our organization is to you. So I truly value that. Thank you for your contributions to Pope Air Force Base, now Pope Army Airfield.
Cool.
I just came there 11 days since I PCS'd in, so it's still there, it's still standing strong, so thank you for
Hey, we're going to come visit you. I think we're trying to get out there like in October time frame. We'll come
Okay.
see you. Yeah.
Yeah, good deal. I'm at Seymour Johnson now, but I can. It's not
Oh,
too far.
okay,
I can
okay.
TDY now.
Yeah.
I can TDY now. I love that opportunity. But hey, so my question is in regards to recent events here. The war in Ukraine has showed us that private organizations such as SpaceX have very unique capability and to get after things quicker than the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force was, and that's in regards to updating their code to circumvent Russian jamming and to truly get after keeping communication and command and control up. My question for you in that vein is, what is the Department of Defense and the Department of the Air Force doing to enable and make sure that we're able to make those decisions at the tactical level to truly get after being a combat-capable force?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm sitting here in amazement that one of our religious affairs airmen is so engaged with SpaceX and what is going on with Russia. Like kudos to you. So lots of things. In fact, since the Secretary of the Air Force got in this seat, I'll tell you, he's been probably more focused on making sure that we are able to compete if we have to, right? Our number one job in life is to deter. But if we have to compete, we've got to be able to be competitive in our space, and we've got to be able to win. And some of those things he's looked at is how do we speed up the acquisition process? How do we make sure that we partner with industry, capitalize on that with industry, with academia, with our allies and our partners? And so all of that is happening in hundreds of lines of efforts across the board. And how, again, especially the how can we learn from our civilian partners that don't have a lot of the bureaucracy that sometimes we do. We're seeing the slow change to that, but we're seeing the change nonetheless. We're also seeking a lot of legislative authorities, and so that we as a Department of Defense, specifically the Air Force, can actually get after some of those things. So it's not lost on us. In fact, the Secretary General Brown, I'm sure the CSO, they spend more time on the Hill helping to share with those leaders how we've got to be able to move faster than we ever have before. And it's encouraging when we talk with those leaders on the Hill, when they say some of the words that we, the Air Force, have shared with them, which is we've got to be able to accelerate change or lose. They can't be buzzwords, so they're starting to get it. Our secretary introduced China briefs to many of the Hill members, unclassed and classified versions, to be able to have a whole of nation effort to be able to, again, get after some of the things that you're talking about.
Good good deal. Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thanks.
it.
Thanks.
Master Sergeant, we have over here.
Hi, Chief. Master
there.
Manisol I am the superintendent at GBSA Randolph.
Ooh,
I'm going to read from this so I don't fangirl out and,
Okay.
and focus.
good.
In my experience, I've been blessed to collaborate and integrate with a variety of different enlisted AFSCs. In my household alone, my husband and I have served in 5 of them.
Yeah. 5
5.
AFSCs?
Yes, ma'am.
What were the AFSCs?
Mine was 1 in 3, but I
Okay.
failed out of Chinese.
Okay, good.
1 in 1 and 5 RO. My husband was a C-130 load, and then he got picked up for the enlisted pilot program.
That's awesome.
He is awesome. And now he's, don't tell him I said that.
Yeah.
And now he's a cyber warfare.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So in that experience, it's extremely hard to ignore, and my husband times the unique capabilities and facts and expertise and knowledge that our firearms have on the enlisted side. And I feel like I have spent a lot of precious time showcasing and showing my leaders and educating them and what I bring to the fight, when I should be just be utilized to my capacity.
Yeah.
How can we work as an enlisted corps in the 5RO field with you to
Yeah.
bridge that gap so we can spend more of our time just helping our airmen and guardians?
Y'all clap. Y'all can talk. You know, I see a change coming. Just so you know that, and I'm excited for it. Sometimes I get frustrated because the bureaucracy keeps us from moving fast enough, but I see a change coming. Maybe not necessarily all during my time, but I think when I look at our staff sergeants and our tech sergeants and our captains and majors, they will see a lot of this change come through. Because when you talk about the talents and the skill sets that our enlisted force bring to bear, like, I get excited because I see it all the time. In fact, I tell the secretary all the time, I wish I had a GoPro on me, right? And people could see what I see because you just see the talent. And so if I can, we're like in this skiff. This isn't like being live streamed on Twitter or anything, right? Like, okay, good. Because some of the things that I say, not everybody appreciates. You know, the chaplain gets to sit in Corona discussions, and we have sometimes futurists come and talk to us. And I challenge some of those futurists, and I think most of them sometimes agree with me because I'm like, okay, if you think about the Air Force in 2040, I actually don't think that the Air Force is going to have an officer and an enlisted corps anymore. I just think deeply, right? General Brown rolled out 4 action orders, by the way. He made it easy. A, B, C, D, Airman Bureaucracy, Competition, Design. I am really encouraged when I look at the Space Force, because the Space Force, being almost 3 years old, was able to essentially create their force from scratch. They could have done anything that they wanted to do to make sure that they could focus on being a warfighting organization, right? Action Order D, Design Implementation, that General Brown pushed out, ought to challenge every single one of us serving and wearing this uniform to think deeply about how we are designed, and more importantly, how we probably need to redesign ourselves to be able to be the Air Force that our nation's gonna need. Like, that's the only thing that matters. How can we make sure that we can defend our nation if needed? And if you think deeply about that, based on the adversaries and the challenges we have today, would we look the exact same way as we do today to better compete against an adversary like China or Russia? Like, if you think deeply about it, the answer is no. We are not organized and structured in a way that allows us to best compete against China and Russia. And we're not tapping into our strengths and our skill sets because of old thinking and culture that says, well, you have 5 stripes and I'm an 04, so surely I've got to be smarter. that's full on not true, like, right? So how do we start to actually tap into the skill sets that our folks offer? We will iterate to what that looks like in 2040. I think the next chief of staff that we get in, pending confirmation, will follow through on a lot of what General Brown already laid out, and the work is being done. Like, we are thinking deeply at what does our Air Force need to look like in the future. I could not have been a bigger fan of, you talked about enlisted pilots and how your husband was enlisted, how he did enlisted pilots. By the way, like, your pilot started off enlisted way back when, if you look back at history. And I told General Brown, I said, sir, I think the one regret I will have sitting in this seat is that I couldn't convince our force that we should have enlisted pilots. They killed it, by the way. If you ever spoke to any of the enlisted pilots, they were killing it in their game. They were holding stand-eval positions, they were instructing, and they were doing good. But guess what got in the way? Culture. Like, it's a shame. Culture and bureaucracy. In the UK today, they have enlisted pilots in the British Air Force. The United States Army uses enlisted pilots. I was talking to an E4 out when I was in Niger, uses enlisted pilots. The Aussies use enlisted pilots, but the United States Air Force, the world's greatest Air Force in the world, but again, where there's frustrations and challenges, there's opportunities. So I don't get caught up in the, I'm not going to stay mad forever because we don't have enlisted pilots. Like, we've got to move on, and we've got to move out on the things that we can change. But in years from now, we will start to change and modernize to think deeply about talent and be able to tap into that. But that's strategically thinking. Here's what I would tell you at your levels. Like, you help be that change, and you help showcase what the team brings to the fight, and care less about some of that, right? We have to be, we're in the profession of arms, so we have to care about, good order and discipline and things like that. But I think the sign of a good team is that they value the strengths that everybody brings to the fight. My first unit, by the way, my first special ops unit, 24 Special Tactics Squadron there at Fort Bragg, I was a senior airman, and I learned at that unit that they don't care what my career field is. They don't care what my rank is. They expect me to be on a high-performing team and to deliver, right? And by any means necessary. And so I think we can take a lesson from some of those playbooks and just tap into the strengths and the skill sets that people come to bear, unleash them, and let them do them. Thanks.
So we have 2 questions coming up. Yes, sir, you have time.
Chief Bass, good to see you, ma'am.
You too, sir. Can I give a shout out to you, sir?
Yes,
So big kudos, because when I was it DM, sir?
It was Shepherd Air Force.
Shepherd. When I went to Shepherd, you gave me a book.
Yes, ma'am.
Generation Z Unfiltered. If you have not read that book, like, you need to read it. If you have children, you need to read it. If you lead people, you need to read it. I came back so fired up from that book, sir, that you gave me, that I was sharing some of the nuggets that I learned from Generation Z Unfiltered to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and to the Vice Chief, that I was just going on and on like I was the expert in Gen Z. But here's what's cool, sir. Like, literally 3 weeks later, the Chief of Staff and the Vice Chief are all acting like they're experts in it because they just read Gen Z Unfiltered. And then they shared that with the Wing Command team. So literally, all your wing commanders across the Air Force are all reading that book, and it's on my reading list because of you. Yes. So thank you.
And you know, ma'am, as we talked when you were at Shepherd Air Force Base, the reason why I grabbed that book is I didn't know Generation Z.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn, so thank you.
Yes.
So my question for you this morning, ma'am, is since you were just talking about culture and we're talking about the Air Force in 2040, I really love the Fortify the Force. You know that I think that's a very important initiative. We have some connective tissue in the Air Force chaplaincy with what is trying to happen there. Could you tell me how we would fit into Fortify the Force, and what is your end point? I mean, what are you hoping it would achieve?
Absolutely. Can I ask the question, who has not heard of Fortify the Force? Any? I'm impressed. Chaplains are smart. Okay, very good. Like I go out and I talk with audiences, and most folks haven't. So the Fortify the Force initiative team really is about 1.5 years old, and it started from a Corona brief where the chiefs of staff and the secretary asked myself and Chief Master in the Space Force to come and talk about the state of affairs as it relates to our airmen, right? Like, what is a pulse of the force? And we were a little confused by that. We're like, we're going to speak at Corona about the pulse of the force? Like, I could probably sum it up in about 30 seconds, right? The pulse of the force relatively is good. Our airmen and our guardians will never fail. We were also coming off OAR and OAW during that time, right? We see that our airmen will do whatever to never fail. But the real pulse of the force was the elephant in the room that I felt like we were avoiding, which is, but our airmen are tired. So we share, right, like broadly, like all of us were. And so we're like, that's what we really need to talk about. And then we went around for a while. We're like, they're not ready for that. The 4 stars aren't ready to hear that, right? Like, but we did it anyway. And so we shared kind of that pulse and how we've got to do something better. And the answer is not going to come from a program from the Pentagon. And so what can we do? And so the table got slapped. We can start a thing. We didn't know what the thing was going to be, but we knew we were going to give it to our airmen to help us figure out what that was. So our 12 outstanding airmen, I gave them the problem set of, we need to hear from our airmen in the field on what are the challenges that keep them from being their best. We hear a lot of things broadly, not enough mental health stuff, not enough this, not enough chaplain. Like, we hear all those things. How do we start to get that? And how do we streamline the recommendations that they go directly to me and the CMSAF, and we cut out the bureaucracy, if you will. And so that's when they came back to me and they were like, Chief, we want to call ourselves a Fortify the Force initiative team because we've got to fortify our force. And so they came with that, and how I think you all are connected just naturally is you all should be part of that core group of folks because you are such an important part of resiliency to the force. You fortify us. So in the space that you're in, how can we make sure that we have a liaison, if you will, or several of them, because this is all volunteer. This isn't a, hey, mandated, you will participate and fit. This is a, we should have a mandate to have you as part of the core group, but you'll have hundreds of volunteers. And by the way, it's grown from like 12 people to over 500 folks, where again, that team should be informed by the initiatives that you all are working. You should help complement and not be in silos on things that we want to push across the enterprise. And so it should really be a collaboration between the chaplains, the SG community, A1Z, and anybody else who has a role in the resiliency of our folks. And you also have to have in that group, which they do, people who understand policy and who can help move the ball. So one of our leaders in the Air Force DS team, the Director of Staff team, is actually on that team to help cut some of the bureaucracy and task appropriately.
That's outstanding. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
Great initiative.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move over to our left. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chief.
Hey there.
Good morning to all the wonderful people who are here. Talking about the subject of fortifying the force and building resiliency and readiness, I want to talk about a subject that I've been interested in for some years now, and it deals with being a good wingman. I know it's something we talk about a lot, but sometimes I think we could do a better job of putting it into practice. I look to the Army, and they have something, as I'm sure you know, the Battle Buddy program, which has been effective in helping with preventing suicide, sexual assault, and also the issue for alcohol-related incidents. I know this is something you've been working on too. I've actually floated the idea in the past to certain leaders about Air Force sort of adopting and altering that and tailoring it so that maybe not for all ranks, but certain ranks especially, we may want to consider the idea of partnering people up so that they care about one another. Of course, you have to worry about, well, what if one goes on TDY or PCSs, and how do you fill that in? But I'm just, I'm looking up some stats. I just want to share that briefly, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of the system you're probably aware. But for the battle buddy system, or what I call it an enhanced wingman system, if I adopt it for Air Force, reduces rates of suicide, sexual assaults. Buddies keep each other informed about key instructions and information, promotes cooperative problem solving, increases morale and confidence, decreases stress, and eases transition to a military lifestyle, improves safety, promotes better leadership. But you have some drawbacks. Personality conflicts can occur, adds extra responsibilities, interferes with desired activities, and requires commitment of caring for another person. So it's not a perfect system, so it could be tweaked. And lastly, I just want to share this. In terms of asking soldiers, is having a battle buddy, one-on-one relationship, or even more people in a small group who care for you, look out for you to make sure you're safe and good. Those soldiers who were asked about, well, do you like the system? 9% said they don't like it or they really don't like it, 9%. 10% were non-committal. But 81% said they liked it, or they liked it very much.
Yeah.
And finally, that same group was asked, is the battle buddy system a good practice? The stats on that, 10% said no, it's not, they don't like it. 22% were neutral, but 68% said yes. So it seems that it's a very effective system, and there's a model out there that's working.
Yeah.
And I think it would be valuable as we look ahead to our future and resilience and all those other things and helping the force.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So one, I didn't realize it was actually a program, right? I've heard our Army teammates call folks battle buddy often, and I thought it was in the same way that we use wingmen. And so I'll reach out and I'll chat with my Army counterpart just to get some thoughts on that. But I don't mind flipping it over to the Fortify the Force Initiative team for them to think about that. What I would say is, again, we can't wait on the Air Force to push a program out. If I'm a squadron command team, like, we could say, hey, everybody has a wingman. Like, do you know what your wingman's doing over the weekend, right? Like, again, it's culture that we have to fix. But if we have to have a bit more focus on it from they do that in tech training right now. Like, you don't go off base unless you have a wingman, right? And so what we might need to look at is, again, I'm curious about how is the program, really running, and can we provide some of that? And while we're doing that, I would say don't wait on us. Perhaps you go back to your installation and you share that with the wing command team and just get their thoughts on what do they say, because it's too easy to help shape culture. But what I don't want is kind of what I would caution us on is that you're only focused on that one wingman, right? We've got to create a culture where we all care, regardless if that person's my wingman or not. And that, again, comes down to the importance of leadership at the frontline level, that flight level leadership, and so on and so forth. Thanks for that. Yeah, we'll take that down.
Yes, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Hey there.
My name is Senior Airman Nina Shields. I'm at RAF Lakenheath, and I'm a dental assistant.
Very cool.
I'm here to talk about Hope tomorrow, but
Very cool.
I got nervous at ASFA last week to ask you questions because everyone had very sophisticated questions. So if I don't ask this now, I will regret
They
this.
were just using ChatGPT. Don't worry about that. I'm certain of it, because they were way too smart. I was like, that senior airman just asked a question about China like that? So, okay, good.
I tried to, but my Wi-Fi doesn't work here. And thank you for letting me take a picture with you last week. Last week at ASFA and this week at the summit, very informative stuff that I've never even heard or learned about. in the Air Force with Russia, China, everything that's going on, all the new innovative things, being here and being able to talk about hope tomorrow. I'm super excited about that. But, at ASPA, it was all about how to empower, how to work on NCOs and senior NCOs, how to be a good leader. Just super great. I went back and I talked to my mentor and I was just so overwhelmed. So my question is do you see, because this basically lit a fire under my butt of like the big blue and the section I work in dental, I actually process instruments. So I'm in this little room, I don't get much interaction, I'm not in patient care. Just a very big blue trip that I've had these past 2 weeks. So my question for you is, do you see in the future, or is there like a type of junior enlisted TDYs of such to be able to talk with you? And because I can say I'm excited to go talk to my fellow airmen of what I learned and what you have said, and General Brown and Secretary of the Air Force. That lit a fire under me. And can you imagine the scope of building from the ground up of what really is going on here? Because I know when I walked away from ASPA, and I know when I walk away from this, it'll basically kind of let me know why I'm here, and I wasn't here by mistake, and that I do have something to offer here.
Absolutely. So first off, Airman Shields, like, kudos to you, right? If I was Senior Airman Joe Bass, I probably would have passed out coming up and talking on the mic, right? I was always a nervous Senior Airman. A couple things. It goes back to culture. Like, you signed up to be part of a profession of arms. You just happen to be a dental assistant, right? But you're in the profession of arms, which is different than working for Chick-fil-A or Home Depot or in a dental office at your hometown, right? This is a profession, and we've got to get back to the basics of culturally, every airman, regardless of AFSC, understand what that means. A couple things that I would say, right? Culturally, you're probably not going to walk in your med group and you guys are always talking about China, right? That would get weird. However, I think it's fair that you understand the why you have to take care of the people that you do, because here is the implications and here is what our Air Force is doing. I think that's important that every airman understands that. I do think that it's important that if you're tucked away in your room, that you have access to other airmen that are not like you. Other airmen who are not just in the med group, but airmen who are part of the LRS, and airmen who are part of the Wing Staff Agency, and airmen who are part of the ops group and maintenance group, so that you can spend time with each other and sharpen each other up, and culturally that happens. So if I was you, I would go join the first four, right? Every installation has a first 4, 5, 6, or a top 3, and those professional orgs should be there to help grow you. And so because you came and you heard all the great speakers at AFSA, from General Minahan to General Cotton, our STRATCOM commander, and the Secretary of the Air Force himself, I would go to the first forum and be like, hey, how many of y'all were there, and how about we share with the rest of the E4s and below at our installation the things that we did. And at that event every month or every 2 weeks or whenever it is, figure out ways to make that normal, is what I would share with you on, again, culturally, that has to become normal. I'll tell you, and for everybody in here, I couldn't have been more impressed at this year's Air Force Sergeants Association, which was last week. How many of y'all were there, by the way? A few of y'all. So was that my 10-minute warning? I saw her hold up a sign. Is that 10 minutes? Okay. I couldn't have been more impressed. When I first got in the seat and I went to an Air Force Sergeants Association, the level of engagement and the level of questions was a complete 180 from what it was last week. Our airmen were asking questions 2 years ago, 3 years ago about beards, 20 of the same questions that you can't ask about beards any more different ways, right? They were asking about beards, they were asking about all the social stuff, but they were not asking questions about war fighting, at all. And then you go to this Air Force Sergeants Association. In fact, I got beat up 2 years ago from the former Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force because they're like, what's going on in our Air Force today, right? Like, because of the level of questions and what was on the hearts and minds of our airmen. Fast forward to last week, there was 0 questions about beards. Again, not that that stuff isn't important, right? I tell our airmen all the time, the things that are important to you are important to me, but I'm actually more concerned about our adversaries than I am about beards, right? Like, it's important to share. And so there was 0 questions about that. There was 0 questions about the stuff you see on media, like the things that are distractions. It was all on how can I make a difference in our Air Force and move the ball. Like that was it. So I remember leaning over to Chief Master of the Space Force and I said, I feel like I could retire. Like we have done our jobs by elevating the strategic IQ of the force. And so what we did last week by the secretary and all the thoughtful speakers that were there in the panels is to the 3,000 guardians and airmen that were there yesterday, you are going to force multiply. And you're going to carry that message because you're fired up about it. You're going to carry that message to, 100 other people at your base, and they're going to carry the message, and we're going to continue to change. That's also kind of like how the spiritual realm works, right? You drop those seeds on Sunday to the chaplains, and then it goes forth and it multiplies. Yeah. Thank you.
So we have time for one more question before we give two closing
we can't
remarks.
Go to one. We'll do both.
Okay, we'll
good.
take 2. So we'll start with this section over here on the right.
Right here? Right here?
Okay.
Right here. Okay, good.
Okay. Hi, Chief. Staff Sergeant Charters, Edwards Air Force Base, NCOIC of Operations for the chapel. So in the time that I've been in Southern California, I've noticed that one of the biggest points of stress and worry and things like that, especially with our enlisted force like E6 down, is financial. So with the way that the economy is going and the way that it's getting harder and harder to keep up, especially for our lower income ranks, I just wanted to ask, being here and being on the inside, if you're aware of any kind of initiatives that are going forward to try to keep up with the economy more, especially for our lower ranking people, whether that's like COLA in CONUS or anything like that, because I've even talked to a couple of people like master sergeants that if they have bigger families and they PCS from Oklahoma where they were doing okay, and then they come out to the middle of the desert in Southern California where the closest next grocery store off base is 21 minutes away going 65 miles per hour, and it's still, and I'm just curious if there's any efforts or any planning going forward to try to keep up with
There are a lot. In fact, if you looked at my things to get after list, I throw that out on social media on purpose, right? Like I actually throw out teasers because I want the force to know the things that I'm focused on. And the first, there's several things I'm focused on, but I will tell you broadly, it's pay and compensation, healthcare, and the force of the future. Those are the 3 things that I been up all of my efforts on. That's within the force internally, within the DOD, and with Congress. And so when I'm out on the Hill, those are the things that I'm talking about. Just, some data points for you all. When it comes to pay and compensate, when it comes to pay, when it comes to leave, those are not things that your Air Force can fix. It's a matter of law. Like Congress has to help, right? Like that has to be a part of law. So we're doing the work on that. We couldn't have been more vocal. In fact, if you look at some of our testimonies with myself and the service SCAs, we were very vocal on we need a holistic look at today's military pay and compensation, specifically because as we celebrate the 50th anniversary this year of an all-volunteer force, I think that's laudable, but I'm actually more concerned that we can celebrate it in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now, and in 20 years from now. And unless we make some changes to pay and compensation, we are not going to. And so but again, it's a matter of law. So this will take prayer. In fact, I feel like we need to bring my things to get after list and everybody lay hands on it. I'm serious, Chaplain. I'm going to send it to you. Y'all just pray over it. Because it's going to take prayer, because it's going to take a matter of law. But we are doing God's work, the chaplain knows. Like, we are doing God's work to help work that. We have not done a change. We have not had a change to the military pay chart since 2007. Like, a change. And that doesn't mean that you don't get your January pay raise. You get your January pay raise. That's for inflation. Doesn't quite cover inflation, but it's for inflation, right? And I'm probably one of the few people who can actually say things about pay, right? Like, it is, like, when you're up there, our 4 stars, 3 stars, like, they can't talk about pay, by and large, the way I can. And so we've got to fix this pay chart thing that we have. And so I think we're going to have some momentum, but we need a holistic review. I'm concerned about the way that we assess COLA, BAH, OHA, all of those things. The way that we do it today, like, it's a survey with a number 2 pencil. Like, come on, man. Like, this is 2023, 2024. We need a better way. We can use artificial intelligence to help us assess those things, and then we've got to be agile enough to be able to move out on it. So those are the pleas that we're having with OSD. Pray for OSD. So, like, we need help on those things. Healthcare. I'm concerned about healthcare, right? Like, I, as a military brat, I'll never forget my dad telling me, you never have to worry about healthcare ever, right? You go to any hospital, you're going to be good to go. You're my dependent, you're good. That is not the case today. I never want our airmen or families coming out of pocket for pay, but with some of the decisions that we've made in the past, made by great Americans, we've put ourselves in a not so great situation, and our people are paying out of pocket. And so I'm concerned about that deeply. So we're fighting the good fight on healthcare, pay and compensation. We will do the work. I hope that we have some relief this January. We are looking at that, and when I say looking at the pay chart, I'll be honest with you, especially for the officers, I'm looking at it specifically for the people who have stripes, because we are not compensating the most talented, educated, enlisted force in history the way that we need to, and so we got some work to do.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. I see the countdown. It's 2 minutes, but I can't tell y'all how many pastors went over time. So I feel like I'm good. Right, okay, good.
Tech Sergeant McKenzie from Robbins Air Force Base, NCRC, Religious Affairs, ma'am. I'm not nervous, you're nervous. My question is very similar, but I think it deserves a caveat to the side. Readiness is something that includes our families, and we talk about it all day, and it's very much so important. And that being said, COVID gave us a bit of a distraction, but over the past few years, the state of child care in the country has gotten worse and worse from an affordability and accessibility standpoint. For the airmen that we are in counseling with, the airmen that we mentor, every single day they are struggling. Is there anything on your list that you can share with us that is starting to tackle the problem of affordable and accessible child care for military families?
100%. If you look at my list, it has child care on there as a challenge, but an opportunity. And so one thing that I'll leave you with really quick is sometimes we talk about the stuff that we don't have, and we can spiral sometimes and talk about, like, woe is us, and we don't have this, and we don't have enough this, and we don't have, sometimes what we have is good. I want y'all to be proud of your Air Force, because your Department of the Air Force is a reason why OSD is going to host a child care summit September 15th, right? Like, that DOD, remember I said pray for OSD, they need it. When I get frustrated with the Air Force and bureaucracy, theirs is much worse. But the Air Force sitting in conversations with the Deputy Secretary of Defense and with the Secretary of Defense has been so vocal on this, where we've talked about the lack of capacity for child care across the services. Because of that conversation, the Secretary of Defense told his team, have a child care summit so we can start to tackle this. So that is a move in the right direction that I want y'all to know. In fact, I shot a note out to the A1S team last week to say, do we have the right representation on that team to advocate well for our family members, whether you're overseas or whether you're stateside. We need that advocacy and we need people who will be well. So yes, we are pushing a child care summit because it's not just the Air Force. Child care is a challenge across the Department of Defense. Every service, when I talk to my counterparts, are dealing with child care capacity issues. And when you talk to community and civic leaders, they will tell you child care is a challenge within their own communities. So again, the work that y'all can do, right, one, continue to advocate and be vocal on where the Air Force can do better. But we are going to need prayer in our nation to help us get out of some of the challenges that we have. And it really is a national challenge. When I say whole of nation, like we need a whole of nation approach to a lot of the stuff that we're trying to get after, or a whole of society. When I talk to my military counterparts from other nations, especially in Europe, I'm like, hey, are you having a challenge out of COVID on finding a workforce? And they're like, no. It's our nation. I just listened to the news today on how we don't have enough school bus drivers. We don't have enough teachers. Our nation needs prayer. We have got to get it together because we do not need a catastrophe or a crisis or an attack to happen on our land before we come together and get it together. So I would say, yes, we are working hard on a lot of things. We're pushing the Child Care Summit. We are also your wing commanders across the, I never go to a base and not have a really thoughtful discussion on childcare, by the way. Your wing commanders are figuring out ways to get more FCC providers. We need spouses to want to be FCC providers to help care for folks internally. And we're pushing a lot of money and resources to our CDCs to be able to hire and expand capacity. Thanks for that. Thank you.
So at this time, I want to take the opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for your time, for your leadership, for the teamwork, and for your trust in the Chapel Corps. Hopefully, you're able to sleep a little bit better each night because you know that we're here with you wanting to take care of the world's greatest Air Force.
Yes.
At this time, you have a cavalry waiting on you. The number has increased as they've stood up there. See, our chaplains don't have that, so you do have that, and so we might have to exit stage right.
All right. Hey, real quick, just thank you again. I'm seeing so many awesome faces out there. Thank you again for the work that y'all do. Sometimes you may or may not see it, but I promise you, again, that's not for us to necessarily always see. You just lay the seeds and then see what comes forth. So thanks for the work that you all do. Thanks to Chaplain Kitchens, who prays for me every week, and there's several of you all who shoot me notes and pray for me. I tell the chaplain all the time, I need prayer, especially in the Pentagon, because I want to choke folks out, and I know that's not the Lord, So he prays for me. So thanks for what y'all do. What I would just challenge each and every one of you with is make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Sometimes we can be the biggest hypocrites because we tell everybody else how to take care of them and we don't do what we need to do. Physically, PT, mentally, socially, spiritually. So I would tell you, you've got to find ways to fill your cup and don't feel bad about it. Be unapologetic because you cannot fill what you don't have. So make sure that you're doing the things that you can do to take care of each other. And oh, by the way, your wingmen and battle buddies are not just in the Chaplain's Corps. So make sure that you're tapping into the other people that are around you. Tap into your wing command chief too. When I was a wing command chief, I always wanted to have a relationship with those who cared for our folks spiritually. So make sure that you take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and thank you so much for the work that you do for our Air Force, for our airmen, for their families, and for our nation. Hua.
Hua.
Thank you. Thank you.